Bloodbath continues.
What's going on, everybody? We are back. We are episode number 52 of the Club and Sub Pop. Nope, not
I
52.
would say
I'm
52.
sorry.
I was going to
Episode
say, yeah,
number 88. It's UFC Vegas 52
52.
we
There
have
you
this
go. There
weekend.
you go.
Episode number 88 of the Club and Sub podcast. Guys, if you like the show, please drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it, especially since, we're missing the end of PFL here to bring this content to you, even though I don't really want to watch PFL after that Schulte fight. But anyway, as usual, you got me, John. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox. You got Luke at SWR_betting and Lags at Danny_Lags. And yeah, guys, we're gonna hop right in tonight. We got 13 fight slate. It's a weird card. Certainly not the best I've ever seen. But I'll throw it to you first, Luke. We got Dean Barry, Mike Jackson. Any hot takes here?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we had to even try to research this card, but obviously we have to from some perspective. The one thing I will say is at least Barry is a real fighter where Jackson is not. So I think that needs to be said off the top. Are you trying to sit there and parlay Barry at minus 1,000, minus 1,500, all that stuff? Absolutely not. Dude got choked out by a 2-5 guy. That needs to be said, not overtly that long ago. But Mike Jackson just stands so upright. I think he gets absolutely blasted within a couple minutes here. I don't think there's too much to take away from that. I've seen some takes on the over saying that the guy's durable. I don't really buy that, to be honest, when he's fighting an actual fighter who has hand speed and power at the end of the day. So gun to my head, if I was to play this fight, I'd be looking to the under 1.5 at evens, which is still kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really obscure fight. I don't really understand why the UFC felt the need to rebook this for a third time. Like, what is so special about Dean Barry versus Mike Jackson? I don't know. I mean, the bottom line here, I think, is just like Mike Jackson's literally not a fighter, and Dean Barry is. The guy was a journalist who had 3 kickboxing fights and basically got gifted the worst opponent in the history of the UFC to get a win against. He's not good at MMA. Dean Barry really, unless he's blindfolded, should win this fight pretty much however he wants. But again, I mean, look, I don't know. I don't think that Dean Barry should be in the UFC. I think it's weird that he is in the UFC, and maybe there's some credence to a Jackson bet because of that. But I don't know. I mean, Mike Jackson shouldn't be in the UFC either. I just think Barry's much more schooled. And look, he's young and probably has a career, whereas Jackson is a 36-year-old with one professional MMA fight. So yeah, I mean, I think Barry takes care of him. I don't mind the under either. Lance, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of same thing to you guys as well. I would say just the red flag for me, like people liking the over, it's coming off a 3-year long layoff. I mean, like you guys touched on, I don't really think he is a fighter. He's not. Has he been training much at all in these past 3 years? I don't really know. So yeah, so I think Barry probably just rolls him under 1.5 at evens, probably a solid look.
Yeah, fair. Moving on, we got an interesting one in the heavyweight division. We got Marcin Prachnio. He's on a 2-fight winning streak, and he's coming against Lynch. He's looking to get his first fight or his first win in the UFC. Lags, what do you think?
I think it's an ugly fight, and I think it's one of those fights people are trying to plant flags on. Like I said, when I was on the pod 2 weeks ago, it's you're kind of fading shit with shit, and you kind of have Prachnio and Lins, and I don't really know what to make of Lins really in the UFC. He hasn't really shown a great performance, and then kind of with Prachnio, it's kind of huge recency bias from the Khalil fight, to be honest. And I don't know. I think gun to my head, I'd be betting Lins, but I think this is just a shit show of a fight.
Yeah, agreed. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a dogger pass spot on Lins. Obviously, Lins is taking some more money. I'm also one of the people who's not really convinced about this Prachnio invincibility by any means. Even if you go back and watch the Khalil fight, Khalil tagged him and hurt him on multiple occasions, but he just decided to not follow up on anything. If he did, Prachnio dies in so many of those different scenarios, and we obviously seen what Khalil's done to multiple people in recent years and before that. So I think people look at that fight and say that this guy's now all-world durable, and then outside of the Ike Villanueva fight, Ike Villanueva is not a UFC fighter, who we will get to later as well. I'm not a huge fan of Lynn's. I've been very, very low on him historically. I bet Arlovsky against him as well, just because I think he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's incredibly fast at the weight class, and I think he can go ahead and put out homeboy Pragnell in the fight. So it's a dog or pass spot for me. But are you really trying to back Lynn's off a 2.5 year layoff, going down to 205 for the first time in God knows how many years? Personally, not for me, but I'd definitely look to go of violence around this fight if you were to back it.
Yeah, it's like it's a pretty weird fight, and it's one. I mean, I hesitate to say this, but like, are we even sure it's going to happen? And I only say that because I think Lynch has been booked like 3 or 4 times since the last time he's fought. I don't really know what he's been doing. You know, he went from coming to the UFC as a heavyweight, taking 2 quick L's, to now bouncing back down to light heavy. I don't really know what to expect from him here. It's kind of weird. He keeps pulling out of fights. It's kind of weird that he's going down in weight. You know, traditionally, guys who've had big success in heavyweight don't tend to have success at light heavyweight. And we've also seen Lynch, when he started his career at light heavyweight, show that he seemed to be a lot less durable there. So I don't know. On the Pragnell side, look, obviously we know what we get with Marcin Pragnell. The guy keeps a high pace. He throws a lot of leg kicks. He's somewhat dangerous. And he has a tendency to stick his chin in the middle of the pocket completely wide open. Yeah, like you guys said, I'm not really trying to plant a flag here. I guess gun to my head, I'd pick Pragnell just because I do think over 15 minutes his volume is a lot more reliable. Like, we've seen him have a 15-minute fight where he can keep a relatively high pace, whereas, you know, the only 15 minutes of Lynch in the UFC is him getting Arlovski'd, which again, I'm not gonna like hold against him. A lot happens to a lot of guys, you know, but I haven't really seen him show the ability to keep a high pace against anybody decent. So I'd lean Pragnell, but I mean, I'm not betting this. Moving on, keeps getting better. We got Aori Kuleng taking on Cameron Ellis. Luke, what are your thoughts here?
Weird fight, you know. Ellis, one of these other guys that we're going to talk about, kind of your kitchen sink, you know, throw everything in the first round, submission over position type of guys. He's either going to get guys out or he's not going to get the guys out. And if he doesn't, he's going to get finished. And what I will say for Aori is that at least he's shown to prove like somewhat durable despite getting dropped, you know, in I think a couple of his fights and then twice against Molina as well. But he's a guy who's going to go out there and force action, primary boxer. I just don't think Ellis really holds up under that pace. I know we saw that Ellis fought a lot more conservative against Phillips, but Phillips is also a guy who's consistently to play the outside game despite his level. People talk about that. I'm like, oh, Phillips is a really good fighter. You know, he survived, you know, around there, but it's like, okay, once again, a guy is going to play the outside at the same time. So I don't think that's a transparent take necessarily where a guy in Aori is going to go out there and just get in his face for better or for worse. So do I think that Ellis could potentially like clip him and sub him? I think it's in play because the guy has no defense and he has been subbed in multiple losses at the same point, but we still haven't seen him have to defensively grapple much. So I'd still look to more, instead of a side, like the under. It's sitting at plus money right now, and I don't really understand that based on how both guys fight. You're getting 7.5 minutes of absolute chaos. And if the fight does go over, I mean, we're looking at the fight doesn't go at like minus 200. So it's like, if the fight goes over 7.5 minutes, that's to say it can't finish after that. But if it does go after that, we're kind of in no man's land for Cameron Ellis. Like, what does that even look like? We have no idea. So I'd much be, I should say, I'd be much more apt to take plus money on the under 1.5 at plus money from a violence based fight and guys who are going to throw.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. Honestly, like I had like thought if the line came in to like maybe minus 200, I might take a shot at Aori just because it does seem like Ellis is just kind of a classic glass cannon, you know. Like you said, you can clip him and sub him, he can get wild. That's live, but like short of that, it kind of feels like the cardio dump from Ellis is pretty consistent. If Aori pushes the pace, he's pretty consistent to push historically. And at that point, he probably just takes over the fight and finishes him. Like Ellis is a great hammer and a terrible nail. And even like Luke, you touched on it, even the Phillips fight. It's like, yeah, Phillips did his normal thing, kind of let him hang on the outside, but he still couldn't get past the middle of the second round in that fight, you know? So it's just like, could he clip him and sub him? I suppose that's in play. But like, even the guys Cameron Ellis is finished, he's not going out there and just killing like top level dudes, you know?
Patty Pimblett, bro.
Oh, yeah. Patty
Top level guy, Luke.
That was fairly early in Pimblett's career too, right?
I'm just messing with you.
No, I know.
I think it was like his fourth fight.
I mean, honestly, it's not unimpressive, to be honest. Like, you know, it's better than most of the dumpsters he was fighting over in Cage Warriors. But, yeah, I don't know. I just don't think you can reasonably put Aori finish higher than like 15 to 20%. And at that point, it's like, what is his
finish?
Ellis finish, sorry, yeah. And it's like, at that point, what does the Ellis decision equity look like? To Luke's point, we haven't seen it, and what we have seen is the guy tends to melt the first time things go wrong. So I actually think there might be some value on Aori here. Lads, what do you think?
I was actually thinking about that too, John, before the pod. I was thinking, like, even at the chalky number, not that I'm trying to lay it, but, like, I think it probably is still value just because, like, I think Aori pretty much hasn't covered outside of that first round, that early storm from Ellis, but he's just so damn hittable that it's like, you really want to lay minus 230 on Aori in this kind of fight. So I was looking right now. They got the under 2.5 at minus 160. That's not a horrible look.
That's not bad, actually. Moving on, though, we got Tyson Pedro. He's coming back off a long layoff from an injury, I believe, taken on Ike Villanueva. Honestly, I liked Pedro as a prospect on his way up. You know, he's a good athlete. He's not a bad boxer. He's a somewhat slick submission grappler, if not a good one. I just think Pedro's biggest issue is he's had pretty horrible fight IQ, you know? He got himself hurt in the Rua fight by grappling instead of finishing him when he had him basically dead to rights. But, you know, the only time he's really gotten outclassed was by Latifi, and that was Alir Latifi just wrestle fucking him. And that's forgivable to me 6 fights into his career. He's still young enough that I think him making some kind of run isn't out of the realm of possibility. So I like his skill set. And in terms of this matchup, I mean, what can you say? Ike Villanueva pretty much needs to hit a wild KO early or he's done. Pedro's superior striker in every way. He's a superior grappler. He pretty much should take care of this however he wants. But given the way Tyson Pedro's career has gone, maybe Villanueva will pull something out of his ass. But like I think like minus 500 or 600 is more or less right. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, so I know there's like some obvious concerns with Pedro with the 3-year-long layoff and the injuries like you touched on, but I think that even if he's like 70% of what he was, he should run through Villanueva pretty easily. So my first play on the card is the under 1.5 rounds, minus 165. I have a unit on that. I think it's an easy smash block for him.
Luke, how about you?
So I played Villanueva. I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I mean, you guys brought up all the main points here. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of Tyson Pedro. Even going back to his days earlier, I've been pretty vocal about the fact that the guy's not as good as he's been pegged to be. But it's another one of these spots in multiple points on this card, whereas despite me not thinking that, you know, or highly of a fighter, it's who they're pegged across against. And I've been very vocal about saying that Ike Villanueva is just not a UFC caliber fighter, let alone a guy who should be fighting at 205 pounds. He's an out of shape middleweight. He's 38 years old. He defends strikes like shit. It's like, I'm sorry. It's just the reality of the situation. Like, I don't want to talk shit about the guy.
It just sounds so awful.
Yeah. You sound like the guy died.
It's just the reality of the situation. And if you try to like extrapolate a little bit, like throw stylistic stats, all that bullshit out the window, it's like, what is the UFC trying to do here with Tyson Pedro? They're getting him. The guy comes back off of reconstructive knee surgery for 3 years. They're giving him a 38-year-old journeyman, for lack of a better term, to go out there and kill. That's what they're doing. And that's what Tyson Pedro is going to go out there and do. Despite him like having like a ton of submission success, I think he can definitely sub Villanueva if he wants. Honestly, I'm more actually on the side of knockout. I think he just knocks out Villanueva. I think there's just a big athleticism gap in the fight as well. So Am I trying to necessarily parlay Tyson Pedro at minus 600, off a 2-year layoff? That's kind of where it gets a little dicey because that's just not really in my Rolodex. But in looking at props, the under 1.5 to what you talked about legs, finish props for Pedro, I don't think are bad.
Well, that's another thing too. Finish like inside the distance for Pedro is like minus 250.
That's actually pretty good, to be honest. But
well, yeah.
I mean, what happens. If you lay juice on the minus 250 inside the distance, there's going to be like 4 near finishes, and Villanueva is going to cling on to life for 15 minutes. Like that's, and if you don't bet it, Pedro's going to just decapitate him 20 seconds into the fight. That's.
He's going to knock him down 3 times, and then Pedro's going to throw like an illegal knee, and then we're just going to get like technical decision, and then
That is the way it has been going lately. Moving on, God. It's a bleak card, man, on some of these early fights here. We got Dwight Grant taking on Sergey Condosko. Lags, got a strong opinion here?
I was one of the first guys that messaged in the chat, and I said, "Man, this Condosko guy is just straight tits." Like, I don't really. I think his record's pretty padded, to be honest. The guys he's fought aren't that great. The guy's pretty low volume. But the thing is, what Luke touched on earlier, it's like the guy's pegged up against, and it's like Dwight Grant's also another low volume guy that doesn't do a lot. So it's like, I think this is largely going to be a staring contest that goes 15 minutes. I don't really have a strong take. I think, honestly, like I was looking at it, that goes the distance at minus 160 might not be a horrible look, but I'm not trying to lay juice here, to be honest with you. It's just a pass for me.
Luke, how about you?
Yeah, zero strong opinion here for me either. Who knows how the guy looks, coming off the layoff at all. I will slightly disagree with legs. And, he has fought over in Russia. He's fought some decent guys over in ACA and ACB. But Dwight Grant's just one of these anomalous type fighters where you have a guy who can go out there and hurt a guy like Daniel Rodriguez and put him on the ropes. Go to a split decision with, Alan Jouban, who at the time, okay fighter, at least mid-tier at that point.
Jouban wasn't bad.
Jouban, not bad. But then he goes to split decisions with guys like Zach Otto. It's like, so he's a guy who's going to perform down to his level of competition. He's not going to throw a lot of strikes. He's not going to wrestle. He has shown none of that historically. He has no grappling upside. So it's like, if you're betting Grant, I mean, you have to be betting KO, right? I mean, if you are betting him, I guess, on the money line, you say, okay, he greases a split. It's like, okay, but you're also playing even money. So it's like, what upside are you getting on Grant playing him there? And then if you're playing Condosko, you're saying, okay, well, then, the guy 3-year layoff, he's 29 years old. He's fought a decent strength of schedule. He goes out there and, puts on a decent performance, but there's just so many red flags in this fight. I don't know how anybody's like betting it at all. Like, this is the biggest pass spot of the entire card.
Yeah, I agree. And like, I mean, it's funny because I'm not sure anybody as athletic as Dwight Grant has done less with more in MMA. It's, I mean, obviously he's a big hitter. He's like tall, he's long. But like, he moves like Bambi, first of all. It's really, he's like so gangly. Like every now and then he'll explode into a right hand, but other than that, it's mostly just kind of hanging on the outside. And the bizarre thing with Grant is it's like I think he could grease a split just because it's like, for Grant's power just deters people throwing at him. And Condosko, not a super high volume guy. You see Grant, like, I bet Jouban against him. I'm just like, how the fuck is Alex Jouban even on minutes with Dwight Grant? Like, he didn't get hurt. How the fuck did he lose that fight? People are just afraid to throw strikes at Grant. And so he can get lucky from time to time. But honestly, like, if I had to pick a side, it would probably just be Condosko, because I just feel like what you need to do to beat Dwight Grant is just the bare minimum. Just the bare minimum. Don't die. Throw a couple strikes a minute, and you're probably going to be okay, But Condosko's had a long layoff.
Yeah,
It's tough though.
Yeah, like I had Trinaldo in his last fight too, and that was close.
That's what I'm saying, dude. And Trinaldo is like a lot better than Sergey Condosko,
Exactly. In full transparency, that fight should not have been split. Trinaldo won that fight 29-28, but That's the point that we're talking to. This guy has this quasi low volume outside weasel power. It's like, bro, who's betting this fight, bro?
I know. Yeah, it's a pass. I'm passing it. This is going to be, I mean, honestly, this is the worst fight on the card, most likely, if we're being completely honest. I hate watching Dwight Grant fights. So we're going to move on to a really fun fight, though. We got Marc-Andre Barriault. He is taking on the Beverly Hills Ninja, Jordan Wright. Lags, what do you think here?
Yeah, it's my strongest take on the card, and I think everybody kind of, when this fight got announced, probably had the initial same reaction that, oh, Jordan Wright could probably clip, Barriault early. He's coming off 2 months from his last fight and whatnot. But like, if he doesn't get clipped early, Barriault's going to put him through the absolute fucking grinder and probably finish him early or finish him late. So I on DK they have the under 2.5 rounds -150. I have 2 units on that. I think it's a solid spot. I really don't think that he's going to get clipped early just because the technical striking, we talked about this. The technical striking from Wright to Njokuani is just like absolutely levels. So I think Barriault's out of here for sure.
How about you, Luke?
Yeah, I like Barriault as well here. Obviously short notice, not the greatest circumstance by any means, but once again, context of fighting a guy who is a round one finisher bust archetype where you say, no, the guy's coming in and he's fighting a pace machine. Well, that's not really the case, with Jordan Wright. He's going to go out there and throw everything, his elbows, his knees, his spinning kicks, and try to get guys out of there. And I'm just not sold on this, I guess, new narrative, apparently, that Marc-Andre Barriault is not durable based on his last fight. The dude got clipped behind the ear. I mean, if anybody who has been watching MMA for any stretch of the imagination, he knows that you clip somebody behind the ear, they go down. It does not take a strong shot in any stretch of the imagination to put somebody down.
And we saw, sorry, real quick, Luke. We saw it honestly just earlier today with Akhmedov. Like those right hands that he was throwing, he ended up clipping on the back of the head.
I missed the fight, so I can't speak to it.
Okay.
But,
yeah.
Gotcha. The example I give always is why am I blanking on their names now? But fucking I'm blanking on this.
Sorry.
I'm blanking.
That was my fault.
You kill me, Lex. You kill me.
I'm sorry.
No, my point is that it's a pressure point. It's not like someone just getting deaded with a flying knee or their chin getting checked or something like that. Like honestly, in my opinion, you clip somebody behind the ear, it's the exact same parallel to someone getting submitted. Like it's not like an overt, all right, they're on the shelf for 6 months now. That's a big red flag. Not for me. Prior to that, Barriault has never been knocked out. And I think in 24 amateur and pro fights prior to the Njokuani knockout, which happened in 16 seconds. And if that fight extends, I think that fight plays very fucking differently, to be honest. So, all right. Yeah. Wright could go out there and clip him. Great. What happens after that? What? Like, seriously, Barriault's going to beat the living shit out of this dude, if we're being honest. And if you want to look back at Barriault, you say, okay, the guy's 3-4 in the UFC. Okay, look at who he's fighting. He's fighting guys like Park, solid MMA-based striker who has offensive wrestling upside, who has grappling upside. He's fighting guys like Andrew Sanchez, who comes from a collegiate wrestling background. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's fighting a guy in Chris Jocko, who's been in the UFC for the last 10 years. Like these are the guys he's losing to. And in the guys he is losing to, he's taken a round off of all 3 of them. What has Jordan Wright shown that he can win minutes against anybody? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So once again, it's round 1 KO or bust for Wright. I'm assuming based on how this fucking year is going, he's going to clip him with a spinning back kick or some bullshit elbow, transition guillotine, and I go into a coma. But stylistically, I don't know how Marc-Andre Barriault isn't like 80% in this fight. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I'm a little bummed the line is like blowing out because early on, 5 times opened him a dog, which was insane, but it actually sat there for a few hours. I am probably going to play Barriault as well. I thought about holding out and maybe trying to grab him live, except like I kind of think, I mean, obviously Wright could finish him and he's going to come out hot, but like, I kind of think once Barriault gets comfortable, I think he's going to hurt him and hurt him bad. And that could be in round one. Like, I know everybody's just like, oh, power bar. He breaks people down over 2 or 3, but he actually has like pretty heavy hands. And Wright has virtually no defense at all and is about as fragile as it gets. So it's like Barriault's going to force exchanges, and we know Wright's going to live in them. And yeah, on the durability thing, I'm with you guys. Like, to me, a knockout inside of 20 seconds is irrelevant. People all the time will put a lot of stock into it. Dude, I watched Marc-Andre Barriault eat a million right hands from Dalcha and look completely fine. I have no reason to believe because he got dropped with the shot behind the ear, his durability is compromised. Yeah, you pretty much. I mean, could Wright win a decision? I guess theoretically, if he shows a degree of durability he hasn't shown in his career to date. But I just don't think so. Yeah, I come down on I think Barriault should be in the minus 300 or greater range, to be honest. And I'm pretty much willing to fade Wright KOing him early. Look, if he goes down soft here, okay, then I guess, there's something else to talk about. But I don't really think that's going to happen. So I'm with you guys on Barriault. I wouldn't even fuck around. Well, I mean, if you want to play him inside distance, that's not bad. I guess same with KO. But I wouldn't fuck around with round props because I think round 3 is going to be trendy. So is round 2. But I honestly think you can blast him out of there early. Moving on, though, we have – I didn't tape this one. I don't know if you guys did. This fight was announced this morning, I believe. We have Preston Parsons. He's taking on Evan Elder, who is a debutant. Lags, do you have any thoughts here? Have you looked at it?
Nope.
Luke, have you?
No, I haven't.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
I will look at it at some point.
Yeah.
I was not excited for Preston Parsons anyway. So we will move on to a really exciting fight here. We have Charles Jourdain taking on Lando Vannata. I've seen passionate takes all over the board here. Lags, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of another thing. It's like seems like you're playing your flag type of spot, and I don't really have a strong take either way. I kind of think, Jourdain is the better striker here, probably going to land more strikes here. It's just kind of like whether or not Lando's going to be able to mix in the wrestling, which personally, I just don't think it's reliable at a hugely high clip. I just wouldn't be laying the chalk on Jourdain in this kind of matchup personally. So just a pass
Luke,
fight
how
for
about
me.
you?
We've seen Lando take some money on a couple books, and if Jourdain gets to plus money, I might play it. It's a fight I really don't want to play, to be honest, because both guys are one of these, I should say, two of these archetypes of guys who are just going to fight to primarily entertain. So from a betting perspective, you don't really want to back those type of fighters long term. It's one of these fight of the night type of matchups. I've seen a lot of people have strong takes on Lando wrestling Jourdain, and I think he could. But it's like, what is your confidence interval there, and what success does he have even if he does it, I guess, is my question, because his control ratio is shit if you actually go back and look at it with Lando too. So that's something to be said. Lando, hands down, spinning hook kicks. Jourdain. The problem I have with Jourdain is that he looks great at moments and he looks horrible at moments. He'll go for it. He'll put it on guys at other times, he'll back up, he'll shell, even though he might be blocking a ton of shots. Like, it looks optically horrible for him. At the same time, he's going to chop those leg kicks. Yeah, dude. I mean, how much betting based value, I guess, can you extrapolate from like an even based number? It's hard to say. I do lean Jourdain because I do think he's fresher. I do think, despite a lot of damage that Jourdain's taken, I think he's actually taken less damage than a guy in Lando Vannata whose optics aren't great, who does get busted up at times as well. So I do think Jourdain's the side, but am I really trying to run to the window to bet this fight? Absolutely not. I'm actually more so of the opinion that this is a 3-round war where it goes over, where it looks like the books are actually kind of smart to that because they do have the overs and the fight goes as minus money, which conventional wisdom would not be the case. But actually, I do think that's what happens. Would I lay favorite money on it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, though.
Yeah, so like I thought I was gonna like Jourdain a lot, and then like I looked into the matchup, I taped it, I looked at some of like the data in the background, and like I wish I'd played Vannata when he was a dog. I don't really have much interest at -110. I kind of think it's about reasonably lined now. I don't really think there's much weight to the Lando grappling argument. Like I suppose if he was really proactive about it, he could get 2 to 4 takedowns, but honestly, Jourdain's got a pretty good get-up game. I kind of think it's something in his career that people have just dramatically overrated his issues on the map because he got wiped out by like Taylor Lapillus like almost a decade ago when he was super young. But in terms of the fight, it's just like my view of Jourdain. I've said it on this pod a million times. It's just like I don't think there's much process to what the guy does. It's a lot of he'll throw some nice low kicks. He's a dynamic hitter. I actually really liked his performance against Andrade last fight because we saw a lot more volume than we've ever seen from him before, and that was a really impressive performance. But with that said, it's like yes, if I based everything for this fight off of the Yule performance, I'd probably back him here. But there's a couple things. The first is like, we're not that far removed from Jourdain losing 7.5 minutes standing to Marcelo Rojo just because Rojo decided to go forward against him. And by the way, it wasn't like Jourdain's massively swung that fight. Rojo gassed out. Like that's basically what happened. We saw him go life and death and go to a draw with Joshua Kulabau. We saw him get outstruck by Desmond Green long time ago, but it did happen. The guy just hasn't had many clean performances in the UFC outside of his last fight. Even the Rosa fight, for all it takes about Jourdain, like he's going to knock out Lando, it's like, dude, he couldn't knock out Julian Rosa. And like, I love Julian, but like, that is the guy who, when he gets in the line of heavy fires, usually going down, And on the other side, you have Vannata, who it's like, I get it, his UFC record isn't the best, but pretty much all the guys that have beaten him are like, solid mid to like high tier guys at lightweight. Like Bobby Green, close fight, first time went to a draw, lost the second fight, a little bit more dominant. Jakar close, super close fight. David Tamer, close fight. Tony Ferguson, he almost finished him in the first round, like Pete Ferguson. When he takes step downs like Yancy Medeiros, he beats the fuck out of them. And so am I saying he's going to beat the fuck out of Jourdain? No, I think it's a reasonably close fight. I think volume-wise, it's going to probably be close. I do sort of think, I know people like to play, like just pass it off as like meme shit, but like Lando throws a lot of like really like high volatility strikes, but he's actually pretty good at landing them. I actually kind of think he might have a tad more finishing upside than Jourdain here. Yeah, it's a close fight. I think it's going to be a great fight. So I'm happy to just watch it. I don't have a strong take. Flags, how are you?
All right.
No, my bad.
You're good. You're good.
Got carried away there.
Yeah.
Moving on, we got
early, John.
Sumu Derji taking on Manel Kopp. Luke, what's your thoughts here?
This is probably one of my more favorite fights on the card just because I'm very interested to see how Manel Kopp fights, honestly. And I think from a betting perspective, I think that's where the intrigue is for me because obviously Kopp's gotten steamed a lot. I do think he's the better fighter. He's fought the much better competition, but the problem with Kopp is his volume and fight IQ has been historically shit. So to sit there and lay -190, -200 on the guy, it's like, it's a little tough for me, despite him, fighting guys close, in the Pantojas and the Nicolaus. I get it, but it's like he's fighting a long guy in Sue who's 100% going to oblige him in an outside kickboxing based game. So if he doesn't step on the gas in this fight and we're getting a pitter patter 15-minute range kickboxing match, I think Manel Kopp is exponentially better than Sue in that. Personally, I mean, you guys might disagree with that. Personally, I say no. I don't think so. We've seen a lot of strong takes and a couple other ones as well in relation to Kopp going out there and putting on his singlet this week and going out and wrestling. I think that would be very smart. What confidence interval you have in that, unless you have some sort of inside information, I really don't know because there is not a long sample size of Kopp doing that. He is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but primarily Kopp's actually struggled on the floor and on the mat. So I do think it would be smart for him to go out there and wrestle, especially considering Sue's fight in his debut, where he did not look great on bottom in some of those scrambles against Smoka. But yeah, it's another one of these weird fights on the card, man. I think people who are investing very highly in Cop are banking on a few things that we don't have a ton of strong evidentiary basis for, a ton of strong data for. So that's what I'm saying. I think back Cop with caution. To be honest, honestly, I think Sue's the side. At current price, I think Sue's the side. If we get a lower volume kickboxing match, which we've seen from Cop a ton of times, I do think Sue has the game to potentially weasel him, because I do think he's longer. I think he's faster. Big step up in competition. I 100% concede that. But if Cop's not going to step on the gas, he's in Sue's plus 170 in that matchup. I mean, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Yeah. Did you see Cop's Instagram saying he was going to land 8 takedowns?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what everyone's kind of going off of.
I guess my thing with that is, it's like theoretically it could happen, and we did see Smolka tap Sue, but it's also like, I mean, Louis Smolka is a pretty dangerous grappler, whatever else you think about him, you know?
He's great in scrambles too.
Yeah, he is. And so it's like, can I use that fight as a reason to say Manel Kopp's going to look minus 400 if he grapples? I don't think so. I mean, to your point, Luke, it's like Kopp he came to the UFC where the concern was, this guy is not a great grappler, you know? And I will grant you, he improved his takedown defense for sure, but I'm not really ready at all to say that I think he is some plus offensive wrestler who can come out here and just wipe out Sue on the mat. I don't, and if he's not a plus offensive wrestler and it's like he's average, Sue's a lot bigger than he is. It is really difficult to take down bigger guys, especially like long guys like he is, if you can't hit it with the initial shot. Like working to a body lock against Sue and taking him down from there would be very difficult. And on the feet, honestly, like I can't say like I favor Sue, just because I do think Kopp's a fairly technical striker and he's obviously very fast and he's punishing on the counter, but I kind of think it's a bit of a chess match and it's pretty close. You know, I think Sue probably is as dangerous standing as Kopp is. You know, he is taller, he is longer. Kopp's probably the better athlete and a bit quicker. Like I'd maybe give him a slight edge on the feet. Pretty much, I think how you view the fight has to come down to how likely, number one, you think it is that Kopp does grapple effectively, or does grapple, and then number two, how effective you think that grappling will be. Like I'm with you, Luke. The only way I could play this is on Sue. I think you're steering into major volatility if you bet Kopp here, and I mean, steering into volatility is not something you really want to be doing with a guy that's lying near minus 200. You know, Lags, how about you?
Yeah, you know, similar to you, John. I just think the length and the reach, like what you were talking about at the end, the length and the reach of Sue, I think is going to give him issues. I mean, we saw in the Ode fight, he was literally going like tit for tat with him right before the knockout, and he's a tall, lengthier guy who, you know, gives you guys issues. So yeah, I think Sue any plus 150, plus 160 now where it's at. Yeah, I don't hate the shots.
Yeah, that'll bring us to Macy, the future Barber. She's coming back off her victory over Miranda Maverick. Nice little cash that was. Taking on Montana De La Rosa. I'm honestly leaning towards a De La Rosa bet here, to be completely honest. I have backed Barber a number of times. I've always been a bit more bullish on her than most. Some of that bullishness is starting to go away, though. Like, the bottom line is Barber's best asset is her physicality and her strength, you know? When she goes nuts and she just goes bombing in and throwing hooks, she's one of the few women in the division with enough power to actually put women out. Obviously, that helps. The thing is, what we've seen is that she doesn't really do that often. And even if you go back to, you know, her fights with Cyphers and Aldrich, she gets behind in both of those fights pretty early, you know, and then eventually manages to put them out. And then we obviously saw her last fight where she took off pretty much the first round and a half. The Grasso fight, same thing, where she just seems very uncomfortable engaging coming into the pocket. And so, I mean, if she does that here, number one, I actually think if Barber gives her that kind of low-paced outside kickboxing fight, I actually think De La Rosa could have some success on the feet. I don't really rate Barber stand-up at all. It's all looping hooks, wide open, naked leg kicks, chin up in the air to get cracked. And while like De La Rosa's hittable, she keeps a decent pace. I think she's reasonably technical. She's just kind of a minus athlete. And so I think there are paths for De La Rosa to be, competitive standing. And then obviously you have the grappling. And look, Montana De La Rosa, again, she has physicality issues. We saw that in the Mayra Bueno Silva fight. And candidly, I am worried that Barber's just too strong and she can just push her against the fence and beat her up there, similar to that fight. But the reality is what we've seen on Barber on the mat has been horrible. You even date back to her at LFA regionally against Mallory Martin, a fight she won, but she basically won from playing guard the entire fight. You look at her fight, obviously with Roxanne is the famous one, where she just gets held down and can't get off her back. You look at the fight with Grasso, she takes Alexa Grasso down. As soon as Grasso reversed and got on top of her, Barber looked helpless on the mat. And then you go and you look even her last fight with Maverick. Maverick attempted one takedown. She got her down, took her back pretty much immediately. And so, like, DLR, look, she's got physicality issues, but she's a decent wrestler. And I believe she's a black belt, too, if I'm not mistaken. Like, if she gets Barber down here, there's a chance it's around and she can just control her and beat her up there. That's a very reasonable chance. And even if it's not, there's a chance that she could just land 3 or 4 takedowns here. I just don't really rate much about Barber's defensive grappling. I worry about De La Rosa closing the distance, but honestly, like, Barber to be 60%, you have to make some really big assumptions about where her defensive grappling is at and what improvements she's made in terms of, managing distance. So I like De La Rosa here. Lags, what do you think?
So I'm with you. I like De La Rosa as well. But again, similarly, the big red flag for me in tape was the Bueno Silva fight. Just the physicality on her entries and just like it seemed like even though she could get easily, she was able to get to the hip. She just wasn't finishing her takedowns just because of that physicality difference, to be honest. So I like you said, I think Barber could have similar success here in the clinch. So it's just not a passionate take I have on De La Rosa. I could see her having some success, but it's just one that's more just a fade on Macy because I don't think that her striking is any great. So it's more like, okay, her grappling isn't great, but it's not like she has some elite striking to fall back on either. So yeah, dog or pass for me.
How about you, Luke?
Yeah, interesting fight. I think if Macy goes out there and within her last 2 fights where she just does whole fuck lot of nothing in the early rounds, it's like, well, then Montana is incredibly live. And I also do think Montana is live in the sense that, one, I think she's probably the best pure wrestler, at least on paper, that Macy Barber has fought. She's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, a girl who will attempt submissions. We did see homegirl get to her back at the end of the second round and Brandon Maverick as well. So I don't think Montana's drawing dead. The problem I have is in why I'm not backing Montana, at least right now. Maybe that changes. I can't get the Bueno Silva fight out of my head where the girl got 9 minutes of control time and still should have lost that fight. If not for a point deduction, because she just has horrible optics. She has horrible striking defense. It's just not good. She's going to get busted up against a girl, Macy Barber, who perceivably, if she does step on the pedal and go forward, I think she beats the living shit out of Montana De La Rosa. And in relation to the Bueno Silva fight, Bueno Silva is a girl who is content to just sit there and play guard, where I don't think, even if Barber is taken down, she's not going to be a girl who's going to sit there and, try to throw up arm bars. No, she's going to be butt scooting and trying to get to the fence and trying to stand up for everything in her life. Whether that works or not, I guess that's a conversation we can have. But my point is that she's not a girl who's going to sit there and lay on her back. So it's kind of one of those fights where it's like, can Montana land enough takedowns, enough control time to weasel something when she's going to get her ass kicked at space? I know we slightly disagree on that, John, because I think Macy Barber beats the living shit out of her.
I wouldn't say, I agree with you that if she like bites the mouthpiece and does, what made her famous in the first place, that probably happens. It's just like, if she sits back and does that and just tries to jab, I'm not really convinced she wins that fight.
No, I don't disagree. If you told me, if I knew right now that Macy Barber was going to sit there and play an outside game against Montana De La Rosa, I'd have like probably 3 to 4 units on Montana De La Rosa. Like I honestly would, but I don't think she's going to do that here personally. If she does that 3 fights in a row, we may need to reevaluate Mrs. Barber and you know where her where the test scores that came in high school and all that bullshit. Like, no, I think she beats the shit out of Montana on the feet. It's just, what control time can Montana's ever, because I do actually think of Montana is live for sub based on the fact that we saw Miranda get to her back with, I mean, that transition was pretty
Very
quick,
easy.
not very difficult. Montana is a good grappler, so I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. It's just one of those weird fights where you're kind of trying to handicap what somebody does, and you're playing clinical psychologist with them to determine what's valued and what's not. So that's where it's tough.
Yeah, fair. Moving bummer of a fight here. We got Chase Sherman coming back on short notice. He's taking on Alexander King Kong Romanov. Dude, I had a bunch of money. I was able to get down in a couple different books on Romanov, like minus 230 as an opener. I don't generally play openers like ever, but I was just like, he's going to be minus 500. And sure enough, within a day, he was minus 500. So I was like, all right, a few $100 to easy cash here. Nope, that fight's off. And now he takes on Chase Sherman. And I'm going to make a case for Chase Sherman. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make a case for Chase Sherman. Chase Sherman is a fucking horrible grappler who's gassy and a quitter to begin with, and is now coming in on short notice against a guy who was going to do nothing but try to drag him to the ground and beat the ever-living fuck out of him. I guess if you wanted to make a case for Sherman, it's like, oh, guy kicks leg kicks and hits somewhat hard. Like maybe he can keep it upright early. But honestly, I'm not going to try to make that case. It's minus 1,500 now, which seems absurd for UFC heavyweight. But I think Romanov just gets him down and finishes him quickly. I'm not that tempted on Chase Sherman. If he gets the plus 1,000, maybe you just sprinkle it just because it's heavyweight. At that point, it's like, why not? But but I'm not very interested. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, maybe if the under 1.5 is playable, but I don't even think that's going to be playable, to be honest with you. So yeah, it's a pass. He should smash him.
Luke.
Also, I'm going to say is when you are in your now 3rd UFC stint and you are 3-8 in the UFC. I was talking about this with my boys on pub earlier. I don't think there is another fighter out there who is in a 3rd UFC stint with over 10 pro fights who has a record worse than Chase Sherman. I legitimately,
you might be right.
In 25 plus years of the UFC, I don't think there's anybody out there who has that credential, I guess, if you could say. Like I don't think there's anybody out there. Chase Sherman, good leg kicks, obviously. Okay, but what do you not want to do when a guy's going to go out there and try to wrestle fuck you? Leg kick. Like, that's the worst thing ever. And you're now coming in on 3 days notice when you already have horrible cardio and you just got submitted by fucking the Michelin Man 5 months ago, who is a boxer who has no grappling. Like, honestly, people say 1,500 is crazy on Romanov. I don't think that's crazy at all. Like, how does Chase Sherman win this fight? Like,
I said on Twitter, I would have bet Romanov minus 500, to be honest.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah.
To Lags' point, we'll see where totals and stuff sit. Yeah. But it's like Sherman. Did you guys hear that he got a new 4-fight contract too? By the way,
yes,
I did.
I saw
Good
that.
for him. I mean, I guess he's gonna go in there. He's gonna curl up in the fetal position and let Romanov finish him. Take no damage, cash his check.
Honestly, props to Sherman. That guy is going to be one of the most paid worst fighters in the history of the UFC. Honestly, his contract is probably pretty good. The dude has over 11 fights in the UFC, so he's probably getting decent sponsorship money at the time. Well, I mean, at least in relation to the UFC, which is still shit. But nonetheless, he's getting that, but he's still getting that in his 3rd fight deal. The dude's probably making exponentially better money than any motherfucker in LFA to go out there and do the job to a ton of other guys. Props to Jay Sherman. God bless the Vanilla Gorilla for going out there and doing jobs to people.
Two last things I want to say on this fight. What would be really funny though, we were just talking about that 4-fight deal. Imagine after Gelson Almeida fights Parker Porter, that he fights Chase Sherman after that.
I bet they book it. I bet they book that shit.
Like that seems like a And then
we need Sherman Barnett. That's the obvious next choice. Either Sherman Knight or Sherman Barnett. One of those two fights has to happen.
The podcast will shut down if they do that. Robinson podcast canceled. We're done. We don't want it anymore.
I mean, I would try to find a bet on Chase Sherman and William Knight and invariably lose money. That would be epic.
And then the last thing I'll say, this is probably the battle with the best nicknames. You got King Kong versus the Vanilla Gorilla. It's the Battle of the Apes.
There you go. I didn't even think about that.
Moving on, man. Claudio Puelles, Clay the Carpenter Guida. We got an interesting one in our hands here. Lads, what do you think?
Yeah, I haven't played it yet, but I think I'm going to have a small bet on Clay. I just kind of think that he's a guy that's going to be reliable to do more here. And I think this Puelles is a guy that just doesn't like pressure and isn't a guy that just doesn't like a lot of volume coming back at him. So to me, I mean, yeah, Clay's old. Obviously, that's the fear here, but he's going to be the minute winner here, to be honest with you. If he doesn't get finished, I like Clay a lot in this spot. So -110, probably going to play him for a unit.
Luke, how about you?
I like Clay a good amount here, to be honest. And it pains me to say, 40 years old, but the last time I checked, there was a very similar dynamic in our boy Court McGee versus Ramiz Brahimaj, where, homeboy's 40 years old, hasn't looked great in recent years. We got this other young, hot, fresh guy who's going out there and finishing a bunch of people. And we now have a pick and price. And Court McGee went out there and dominated that motherfucker over the course of 15 minutes. Now, I'm not saying that this is diametrically similar, even though I do think that's very possible. Just saying that. My point is the recency bias, the sentiment, the line-based value. It doesn't make much sense to me because when you look at Puelles, I mean, even kind of on his recent run, dude's out there getting dropped, smoked on the feet by bad fighters. I mean, really bad fighters. And you say, okay, look, all right, that was a second ago. The guy's 25 now. All right, he's made improvements, evolutions. He's training out of Charles Oliveira's camp. There you go. It's like last time I checked, within the last couple of years, the guy has just lost a round via wrestling to Jordan Levitt. The guy has lost a round via wrestling to Grutzmacher, right? Against a guy who's fighting a JUCO national guy in Guida who's very consistent to wrestle. That is the consistent path for Clay Guida in all of his fights. That is how Clay Guida has stuck around the UFC for 15 years. You can say he's 40 years old. I don't give a shit. Last time I checked, the guy just went out there and 30-27 a D2 collegiate All-American and Michael Johnson 14 months ago. Via wrestling. He got 10 minutes of top time on the guy 14 months ago. So you can say, the guy's 40 years old. He's one. All right. You can say Michael Johnson's a snowflake. Michael Johnson is a snowflake, but he's a snowflake for a lot of other reasons, not via wrestling. He's not a snowflake via wrestling, right? The last guy to do that to Michael Johnson, Khabib. All right. My point is that Puelles can be wrestled, bro. He can be wrestled. And Guida is very consistent to do that. Now, if Guida decides to, go the Madsen route and they sit there and go patter, I guess that's kind of the concern. But based on the style dynamic of him also being undersized in the matchup, I don't think he's going to do that. And even if he does, even if we see a striking-based affair, Puelles doesn't throw shit. He's a range guy who throws a bunch of kicks, who doesn't have a lot of power, who hasn't really shown anything to me that I give a ton of concern against Guida if this fight is at range at all. So how this fight is pick'em, I really don't understand outside of Guida diving into a guillotine. Possible, he's done it multiple times, but also, homeboy Puelles has never guillotined anybody as well. Even if you go back to Puelles' last fight against Grutzmacher, Gritzmacher, in my opinion, you guys will have to let me know your thoughts on this. Gritzmacher would have won that fight if he didn't just give his leg up and said, "Here, take it," and knee bar me. He gave it to him and then he fucking finished him. Like, I think he would have lost. My point being, from a line-based perspective, like, okay, let's say Gritzmacher beats Claudio Puelles. What is this line? Clay Guida minus 150 minimum.
What is Clay Guida lined against Chris Gritzmacher?
Well, and that's the real thing. That's the thing. I forgot to bring that up too. Gritzmacher was plus 110. Clay Guida is minus 110.
So I'm going to get off my soapbox here, but it's one of those spots where people go, 40-year-old guy, can't bet the 40-year-old guy, but they make no stylistic considerations. Could he sub Guida? Sure. I wouldn't be shocked. Like, I'm not saying Guida's minus 300, minus 400 in the fight, but no, it's my point. All I'm saying, here's what I'm saying. He should not be picking with this guy. Stylistically, there is no reason he should be picking with this guy when he can go out there 14 months ago, go out there and out wrestle a fucking collegiate All-American and Michael Johnson, go out there, survive a barrage against fucking homeboy in his last fight who hasn't lost in God knows like 10 years, go out there and submit a 3rd degree BJJ black belt, and he's pick him with Puelles? What? Like, why? I don't get it. I'm fine to look stupid here. I'm fine. Take it, boys. Take it, boys.
I mean, I'm more or less with you. I'm a little nervous about Clay just because, like, you touched on it briefly. The Madsen, I mean, I was obviously very big on him against Madsen, and like, I get it, Madsen's an Olympian, but I thought, which might be why he chose not to wrestle, but it was a remarkably dumb reason not to do it. Like, half of my analysis in that fight was, you're facing a gassy guy, you want to push a pace on him, and instead he decided to oblige an outside kickboxing match and lose a close decision. Close, but I thought it was concerning. Obviously, he got hurt bad in his last fight, but it was a body kick. But yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, it's like, yeah, I can easily envision a fight like the Madsen fight where he gets pointed on the outside. The thing is, though, like, I kind of think the outside is really the only place that Claudio Puelles is safe here. Like, if Guida pressures him in boxes, Puelles is a bad boxer, man. He's a really bad boxer. And if Guida just stays on him, even on the feet, I kind of think he can box him up. Some volume concerns for Guida, but he should be able to land the better strikes. And if he wrestles, I know people keep talking about how slick Puelles' jiu-jitsu is, and he can sub Clay, and Clay's subbable. Dude, Clay's not that subbable, man. I know he's been guillotined a bunch of times, but most of them were clubbing subs. Look at the last 2 guys to submit him were Jim Miller and Charles Oliveira. Like, there's no danger. Like, there's no danger. Like, obviously, Puelles will look for submissions, but Guida's actually an excellent scrambler. I'd be, unless he gets stuck in a guillotine, which I guess which could certainly happen, but I'd be a little surprised if he just gets out grappled on the mat and like Puelles is able to guard something. That would surprise me quite a bit. I think if Guida takes the right path, which is just wrestling, I think he looks like a pretty good size favorite, personally. It's just, for me, like, he is 40 and he has not looked great in his last 2 fights, in my opinion. And so I do have some concerns there. It's like 40 versus 25, and the 40-year-old has kind of given his opponents the fight they wanted. Like, even the Santos fight, after Santos pretty much killed him and then died from wasting all of his energy, prior to that, Guida had been hanging out on the outside. Very small amount of time, but it makes me nervous. I will say, it makes me very nervous that he'll hang out on the outside. But ultimately, like, when you look at the guys that are beating fucking Clay Guida, man, like, his last 5 losses, Mark Madsen, Bobby Green, Jim Miller, Charles Oliveira, Brian Ortega, like, that is just a world apart from Claudio Puelles. The guy's got like 4x the experience of him. He's a stylistic nightmare for Puelles if he fights to his strengths here. I have to bet him. I feel like weird about it, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's got to be done. So I'm gonna bet Guida. I'm still deciding how big I want to go on it.
Not to cut you off, John, but I think, do you like from a consideration of, like, he sits there and tries to box Puelles? I mean, Puelles is bigger than him. So whereas Madsen, that was not the case.
That's true.
So you have a battle tested guy in Guida who's been around forever. Like, is the game plan of Guida really going to be to sit there and have a range kickboxing match with Puelles?
I mean, I think he can win that fight. It's the funny
I'm not
thing,
saying
you know?
I'm not saying he can't. I'm not saying he can't. My point is that I don't think that is what the game plan is going to be, especially if going back to the Madsen fight. If we're going to play that, like, obviously Madsen, Greco Olympian type of guy or whatever. So it makes more logical sense, hindsight, say, okay, you get the two strong wrestlers or whatever going to sit there and duke it out. That's not really the case in this fight. Like, he can wrestle Puelles.
Oh,
like
easily,
he can wrestle
easily.
him. Like, I don't think to say because he sat there and had, a mid-range, moderate output match with this guy that he's going to do that with Puelles. That's not.
No, I think that's fair, and I think if one of them, I don't think Puelles has like any upside for looking like as a big favorite. I pretty much think outside of a sub, I mean, a Puelles decision win is likely very dicey and relies on Clay fighting stupid. Whereas I think Clay could look like a huge favorite here if he fights the path of least resistance and doesn't get subbed. I'm with you. I think Clay is a must bet, to be honest. I don't. There's a lot of people on Puelles this week, and I don't really understand it. Like, even if you look at the striking metrics, like he lands, his ratio is like almost 40% better than Puelles is at distance. And he's fought like 3x the level of competition that Puelles has fought, it's just every signal says bet Guida big. I'm a little nervous, but yeah, I mean, I think we have to do it, it might be one last time. And like, Guida is actually like a good version of Ritzmacher, It's like Ritzmacher if he was actually good at MMA. So
it's the Walmart Clay Guida.
He is the Walmart Clay Guida. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Dollar store, maybe. I don't know.
Moving on, though, we have honestly, like, as far as women's main events go, this is probably from an entertainment standpoint the best one we've had booked. We got Bate Estaca, Jessica Andrade. She is coming back to strawweight. Little opening path to the title, maybe, and she's taking on Amanda Lemos. Luke, what do you think here?
Man, fun main event. Often we don't see, the chicks headline in the card and us saying, it's necessarily fun. But yeah, this is a great booking.
All right, Luke. All right, sexist Luke. All right.
What are you trying to do? Legs, are you trying to bear me on this card? Get out of here, bro. No, honestly, I think it's an okay spot for Andrade. It's one of those fights where you have a fighter who, in my opinion, is very limited to a very, I wouldn't say small, but smaller, win equity. Lemos, big girl, came down from 135, hits hard. I think she's number one in UFC knockdowns right now at strawweight in the UFC. Andrade isn't necessarily known to have the greatest defense, even though I do think that's something that she's improved on in recent years to boot. But I think Lemos's equity is very front loaded in terms of a KO, and Andrade we've seen, be able to carry cardio, power, output over the course of extended fights outside of her also being an extremely powerful girl. At the same time where Amanda Lemos in the UFC has only defended strikes at 48% and is having a competitive fight at a bare minimum with, I don't want to be disrespectful, but just got to call it a spade, with a gatekeeper in Angela Hill. In my opinion, Angela Hill won that fight. If Angela Hill wins,
she won that fight. If
Angela Hill wins that fight, this fight isn't even being booked, if we're being completely candid. So there's that. Andrade has wrestling upside. She lands over 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. We haven't seen Lemos aggressively wrestled or even face any sort of caliber of overt wrestling in her entire run. So there's that. I think Andrade can win minutes there. I think it's a decent spot for Andrade if she doesn't get knocked out. It's just a gigantic step up in competition. Andrade is only losing to legitimately the pinnacles of these divisions at 125 and 115. You know, the Shevchenkos, the Ioannas, the Zhangs. You know, those are the girls that she's losing to. Where once again we got a girl in Lemos who's having competitive minutes with the gatekeeper. Can she beat Andrade? Absolutely. Once again, it's not a layup by any means. The girl hits hard. She's fast. She's got good timing on her shots, 100%. But from a betting and stylistic and analytical perspective, I don't understand how Lemos can win minutes on Andrade. I don't understand how Lemos can out-grapple Andrade unless she hurts her. So you're giving me Andrade, minus 175. That doesn't make much sense to me. If you want to cover more bases, taking the fight doesn't go, around minus 200, I think is a fair price, even despite it being a women's fight. I don't think this fight hits the cards.
Yeah. It's funny. Before I taped it, I was actually pretty sure I was going to bet Lemos, even though I've been looking to fade her, and I did fade her with Angela Hill. Because my perception, or even though I've bet Andrade a million times, my recollection was, okay, Andrade is going to walk onto shots until you break, and I don't know if she can walk onto Lemos' shots. She's probably going to get hurt. But then you go back and watch it, and it's like that was the case for much of her career. But since the Wei Li fight, she's made some pretty significant adjustments to her stand-up approach, in particular her head movement. And if you look, she actually defended head strikes against Katlyn Chookagian and Rose Namajunas at near 70%. And you can see it in the tape as well, even beyond the stats. She's just not getting hit as flush nearly as much as she used to. And it's even more significant in context with this because Chookagian and Rose, they string together combinations, and it's a lot harder to evade when someone's extending combinations to 3, 4, and 5. But she was still doing a decent job. Whereas Lemos, she's going to throw ones, she's going to throw twos, and she's not going to ever really extend combos. And I get the angle that Andrade tends to wing hooks and Lemos does throw straight. The problem is you have to contextualize it because Lemos doesn't counter almost at all. When girls go forward on her, she isn't baiting them in and then countering off their misses. She is looking at first. That's kind of her whole thing. And so Andrade, who we know is going to go forward and pressure her here, Lemos is going to have to display a aptitude for counterpunching that we just haven't even almost seen in the UFC. First of all, just first to knock her out. But she could knock her out and she could hurt for sure. But also, even if she hurts her early, Andrade's recoverability has been really phenomenal. The only time she's been put out at 115 was against Zhang, and she took a barrage of shots. But then beyond that, I don't know. I kind of, outside of a round 1 KO, I hate being the guy that's KO or bust or round 1 or bust. I know Lemos being hard earlier in fights, but it's just it feels like this fight's going to snowball downhill bad at something. If Lemos doesn't get her out of there in 2.5 minutes, it's probably going to snowball downhill very, very fast. Just Andrade's way she works. It's so much body work, so much leg work. She's a much better grappler. We saw, for as big as Lemos is, we saw her get controlled in the clinch for 7.5 minutes by Mizuki Inoue. Andrade is much stronger and a much better grappler. She's going to get in there and she's going to probably put her down whenever she wants to here. And, Lemos can probably survive into the second. Maybe she can survive into the third. But we know Andrade has the tank to go for 25 minutes hard. We know she's going to continue to bring that body and leg work and that grappling for 25. I kind of think maybe Lemos can keep it competitive early. But even then, I'm this is my whole thing. Because initially I was maybe I'll live bet Andrade after a round. I'm not really so sure. Because unless she stings Andrade bad, Andrade is probably going to win every round of this fight. I don't see Lemos having almost any advantage on minutes here. And so it's unless she hurts her bad, I think Andrade dominates round 1 most likely. I think it gets worse from there. I guess for me, I have to have Andrade minus 300 here. You want to make a case that Lemos KO is 15 to 20%. Okay, I can buy that. But even that is a huge number for women's mixed martial arts, But sure, give her that. But beyond that, it's very hard for me to see how she wins. I think the most likely scenario is a late Andrade finish. Blags, what do you think?
Yeah, similar to you, I think Leon Andrade finish is probably on the cards as well. I have a unit and a half on the under 4.5 rounds at -170. I think that's a solid price. I think for me, the money line price I think is roughly accurate because again, like I think there's some early finishing equity to Lemos, but I think just like you touched on, the snowball effect. Once it happens, it's just going to go downhill from there. And I think just the pressure of the grappling from Andrade is just going to be too much. And the girl hits hard as shit. So yeah, I think we're going to have a violent main event here.
Yeah, agreed. So
and real quick, John.
Yeah.
My girl Mbe, she said I thought SWR picked Lemos. I think you were in my earlier stream. That was on a value-based case from a DraftKings perspective at 7.3. That's what I'm saying. I think Andrade beats your ass, but at 7.3 from a DraftKings perspective, rostership, that's where I'm going Lemos.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Andrade beats her. My record on WMMA has not been good, but I have 2.5 units on Andrade. I think she's gonna own her, to be completely honest. So, but yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Fairly quick show, but I mean, not really.
By the way, I guess to end it real quick, just because we were just finishing up right over top of it. Jeremy Stevens took an L, 30-27.
I told you guys. I wish I.
And then Mantheo had a round 3 KO.
I wish I had rocked up and bet collared, but I did not. So,
what was the time on the Mantheo round 3 KO? Because I had the over.
Let me look that for you. You had the what?
Luke's sweating.
2 minutes and 42 seconds.
So I hit it.
Yeah,
round
you hit
3.
it.
Let's fucking go.
By 12 seconds.
There's that variance I'm looking for, boys.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. We'll be back same time next Wednesday. We got Rob Font, Marlon Vera. Great main event next week. As usual, you guys can follow me on Twitter at John at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags, and Luke at SWR_betting. Take it easy this weekend, guys. Be cautious with your bets, and good luck. Later.